Moving on in development, we're going to look at cognition. Okay, that's basically how we think. Here are the outcomes. So let's press forward. Here we go. So cognition, like we said, is it's thinking. It's how you process information, encode it, store it, like your memory. How we think. It's basically how we think. And Jean Piaget was a Swiss psychologist that was the big name in cognitive development in its origins. And he came up with these ideas because he noticed that his children that were his own made certain errors that were kind of silly to an adult. But he noticed that each of those of his children made those same errors at about the same age. So he went out and studied other children as well and found out that they made those same types of errors. So what he developed was a stage theory, where basically maturity makes your brain better, so it's capable of doing more things. So it's stages once again in development. Each stage means nobody skips a stage and you go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. Okay, you work all the way up and you don't go from 1 to 3 or so on. And it's true of all people. So a couple of concepts that are really important that I know a lot of you are aware of is a schema is basically a concept that we have. A schema will determine how we recognize objects. For example, a chair, like your desk at school has a chair and we recognize it as a chair. But you also have chairs at home, big loungers and stuff. Some of you, they're real fancy ones that recline and stuff. Maybe have I don't know, cooler attached to it. I don't know what happened. But anyway, real fancy chairs. But we still recognize it as a chair because it fits our schema of a chair. As we grow, and even as we get older, there will be things that don't fit into a schema that we have. So what we'll try to do is stuff it into that certain concept that we've already created. And that's called assimilation. However, as we become more experienced with this, and we will change our schemas to adjust for them. And give you an example right here, is this little person is reading a book and there's a dog in it, so it learns that this is doggy. So she develops a concept or schema of doggy, which is a small little animal with fur and 4 legs and a tail and so on. And then she encounters this little cat, and of course she calls it a doggy because she assimilates that cat into her schema of doggy. And of course she gets corrected, and then now she changes her schema and accommodates it so that these furry 4-legged animals, she can distinguish between the dogs and the cats. Okay, over time, as we do this, our schemas become more sophisticated as we accommodate, and the accommodation happens through experience, and we assimilate new things into our older schemas and then fix them, and that's accommodation. And kind of a roundabout way. I think you get it. Okay, so let's look at Piaget stages. This first stage is sensorimotor. Okay, so it's basically based on, this is when the child is first born, until about 2 years old. The sensorimotor stage is that the child, all he knows about his environment is what he can experience through his senses and manipulate. And that's why we have the name sensorimotor. One of the markers of this, and it usually starts to go away at about 6 months, is called object permanence, which is out of sight, out of mind, which basically means that when the child, before this age, or before it develops object permanence, if it has a pacifier in its mouth, for example, and drops it, and it goes underneath a blanket, it's like it never existed. He didn't know it was there, or she didn't know it was there. Maybe this is why it's so fun to play peekaboo with these kids, because it's like when you hide your face, it's like you've disappeared, and peek, did you smile, did you laugh? It's such a fun game. But how much fun would that be if you didn't have object permanence? Okay, so that's one of the markers, and that develops during the sensorimotor stage. And here's our example I just talked about. I should have moved the slide. And we can have a look at this little kid. Look, she knows it's there. It's hidden, but she knows it's there. So she has developed object permanence. The other thing, Piaget believed that people of these ages didn't really think. But what we do know is during the sensorimotor stage that babies can do simple physics and simple math. As you can see in this experiment where 2 objects are placed in a case, the screen comes up and then a hand reaches in and pulls one out, which would mean there should be 1. But if the screen drops revealing 2, that's an impossible situation. And we find that the young child in the sensorimotor stage will stare longer at the impossible situation. Remember habituation? This is how we know that that baby understood. There should have just been one there. There shouldn't have been two. It's not going to do calculus or anything, but it does kind of go against the idea that Piaget believed that little children don't really think. They just sense and manipulate their environment at this age. After the sensorimotor stage, we go into pre-operational stage. Operations are basically manipulations of things that we can do in our mind. The biggest marker of the pre-operational stage is conservation. Conservation is the idea that things don't change despite when we change their form. In this example, this is conservation of liquid. You can pour it right in front of them. They have 2 glasses of milk that are exactly the same. According to them, they'll say they're the same. They can watch you pour it into that, longer, taller glass, thinner, taller glass, and you ask them which one has more milk, and they'll point to the one that has the higher amount. It's exactly the same, and we know that because we're in a further stage. We know it doesn't change, right? You could take it out of that glass and be able to pour it back into the container it started in, and it would be exactly the same. Nothing added or taken away. But they don't seem to understand that at this age. Why don't they understand it? It seems to be they centrate on things. Centrate is looking at one trait of the conservation problem and focusing on it. And in this case, it would be height. For number, if they have candies and spread them apart, they'll think they're more if they're more spread apart. So they're focusing more on the length of it. So centration seems to be what's going on when they don't understand these tasks. In the pre-operational stage, egocentrism comes into play as well. Egocentrism is the idea that you are the center. Everything you experience, everybody else experiences. If you've ever been around a 2 or 2.5-year-old that's reading a book, they'll look at the book holding the cover away from them and pointing to something, ask what's in that picture. And of course you can't see it. And you say, well, I can't see that. And the child will say, well, it's right there, pointing at it, not showing you, because they figure if I see it, you should be able to see it. My experiences are your experiences. If they have a little friend over and they're going to play with some toys that they have, telling one of these kids, like you need to share your toys with your friends, they're not going to understand because they're going to go, well, I'm happy playing with my toy. We're all happy. Okay, so they think that their thoughts are everybody else's thoughts. The other thing in pre-operational stage is the development of theory of mind. Now, this doesn't seem to be fully developed till about the age of 5. And what this is the idea that other people have separate and different thoughts than you do. In this classic experiment with Sally and Anne over here, they show you that Sally puts a ball in a red cupboard and walks away. But Anne goes in and she moves the ball to the blue cupboard. Okay, and then so where would Sally look for the ball? And if you don't have a theory of mind, you would think because, well, I know this is, and Anne moved that ball, that Sally's going to go look in the blue cupboard. But really, Sally has no information. She thinks the ball's in the other one, so she'll probably look at there. That's an indication of theory of mind. Also, looking in a mirror, understanding that's something that's not you. When we use, we find that, chimpanzees and dolphins, if we put a red blotch of lipstick on their cheek, they will check it out in a mirror, knowing that it's them, understanding that that's a reflection and that's them. They have developed somewhat of a theory of mind. Okay, the next stage is concrete operational. So concrete operational means that we can perform things like that conservation task, but it has to be in front of us. It has to be concrete. Okay, so we have to kind of see it and be able to do it. If we see somebody pour that in, the liquid into a taller glass, we know that it can probably come down, and if it was reversed, it would be the same. Okay, we can't imagine it though, because that's in a future stage, which would be from about the age of 12 upwards. So this would be about the age 7 to 12. This is the formal operational stage is 12 and on. And Piaget believed that this was probably the epitome of our thinking abilities. It's called formal operations. So this is, we can think of abstract concepts. If you think of concrete operational as what is, this formal operations is what if. what if this happens? We can foresee consequence of our actions, what we do. We can imagine what's going to happen. We can imagine conservation tasks and so on without centrating on the wrong elements. Okay, so those are his 4 stages that he has. And here's a little chart to kind of go through it with the description of the stage and some of the markers, the phenomena that happen during that stage. This would be a good thing to know. Piaget, again, very influential in cognitive development, but we will look at some criticisms of his things. Another of his theories. Another viewpoint is Lev Vygotsky. And his is a scaffolding view, where basically you learn through experience, that you start to develop because you have a certain idea. It leads to more ideas and more concepts and so on. So you build on what you've had, hence the scaffolding term. He notes around the age of 7 too, we start to use a lot of internal language to try and figure things out. So sometimes we'll just calculate things within our own brain by using language in our thoughts. The zone of proximal development is kind of the distance between where you are and where what the goal is. So for example, if it's riding a bike, learning to do that, the zone of proximal development, we would include like training wheels and maybe somebody holding you up for a period of time before you're able to do it. And the social aspect of it is big. When we have models that we can look at, we tend to accomplish more. We tend to learn more. So his idea is basically when we're ready to learn something, this is the point when we're going to learn something. Okay, some things about Piaget's theory. Like I said, he is influential. However, today we believe development is more of a continuous kind of thing, more along the scaffolding idea. If we emphasize maturity and biological changes, those are people that would think that it's more of a stage type of idea. But in this case, we think it's more, based on experience. Your brain, improves as you get older. It makes more connections, becomes more developed, more mature. Plus, you have more information, so you're able to use it. So it seems like it's a lot more continuous than Piaget said. And there is a larger emphasis on social factors, the things that you are around to help you learn, the influences that you have. A couple of the other criticisms are, like Piaget not thinking that babies were able to think, and we can see from some of those experiments, like the simple math, simple physics, that they can think. Okay, so we are going to leave that there. The next time we're going to get into infancy and childhood social development, because remember, development happens on different in different kind of ways. You develop, physically, emotionally, socially, and there's something else I'm trying to think of. But there's usually 3 ways that we develop, and they don't all go together. So we'll look at the social development. All right, so we will see you guys next time. Bye for now.